Good afternoon and welcome everybody. My name's Jane Wagner and I'm the Regional Chair of the ACT chapter of CIPS. I would like to pay my respects on behalf of everyone today to the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past and present, and particularly any Indigenous procurement professionals in our presence today. Before we begin, just a few Zoom keeping notices. I'd like to advise everybody that this webinar is currently being recorded and will be made available to all members next week. All attendees have been muted during the presentation. However, we do ask you to utilise the Q&A box to write any questions you may have for the presenter and panel members, and we look forward to answering as many of your questions during the Q&A session at the end. You also have a chat button available for you to utilise by making general comments that you'd like to share with the attendees. There will be a live poll question during the webinar, and I really encourage you to participate. With nearly 100% of the ACT membership either working in the public sector or for organisations engaged predominantly with the public sector, our regional committee has always been passionate about building on strong public sector procurement capability and sharing public sector procurement knowledge and experiences. Our members have requested that the ACT Regional Committee work with CIPS to find pathways to convert the traditional Australian qualifications, typically the Certificate for Diploma and/or the Advanced Diploma in Procurement and Contracting, into procurement professionalisation, i.e. the MCIPS recognition. Building on other CIPS education and professionalisation webinars, the ACT Committee hopes that this one-hour webinar will bring together the range of MCIPS pathway options that might be open to public sector procurement officials to obtain that professionalisation. We expect the webinar will appeal not only to our ACT members, but more broadly to public sector officials or those working closely with the public sector across Australia and New Zealand. A little bit about our main presenter today, Charlotte Payne, and panel's chair for today. Charlotte is the head of professional body for the Chartered Institute of Procurement and Supply, CIPS, based at our Melbourne site in Australia. Her role is to raise standards in the profession and promote accessibility to professional recognition. Charlotte has worked for the CIPS Group since 2004 and held the position of Head of Education Partnerships before relocating to CIPS Australia and New Zealand in Melbourne in 2019. Charlotte's current role also includes raising the profile of procurement and supply management profession and collaborating with employers and education stakeholders to drive professionalisation and procurement supply certification. I'd now like to hand over to Charlotte to commence the proceedings today.
Thank you, Jane, and delighted so many of you have been able to give up your time today to join us. As Jane said, I am your panel chair for today, and I'm going to be talking to three panel experts who have come to us very willing to share their experience of their different journeys towards achieving MCIPS and that Chartered Professional designation. So we've got about 45 minutes today where we'll share their experiences and journeys. And then what we would like to do is encourage you to ask your questions. What would you like these panel experts to share with you? What tips and guidance? So please do keep your questions coming throughout the session, and we've saved time at the end of the discussion to pick up your audience questions. So before I get underway and just explain a little bit more about MCIPS and Chartered Professional, and indeed our role as a professional body, I'd like to hear from our audience first off. So it would be really helpful if you could complete the poll, which we'll be loading shortly, just to give us an indication of your work experience, whether you have worked or indeed are working in the public sector or government space, or if you're private sector or not-for-profit, or you've got experience of both of those sectors. So I'm just going to let those poll loads now. Cool, got some good results in. So actually you can see that we've got a clear kind of winner, with those of you having both public sector and private sector experience, and also many of you solely public sector. So thank you for taking the time. I hope those stats really speak to the relevance of this conversation today for you. So I'm going to just commence by talking you through a little bit about our role as a professional body and what the professional designation MCIPS Chartered Professional means. So first and foremost, CIPS's role as the global professional body for procurement and supply. We're ultimately there for the public benefit, to ensure that citizens, stakeholders, third parties have trust in professionals working in procurement and supply management. To do that, we set the standards based on consultation with the procurement and supply profession, and then we put in place programs and assessments to ensure that individuals can both attain those standards, develop those competencies, and also be assessed and verified to signal that they have achieved those. Hence, our professional designation for procurement and supply professionals is the MCIPS Chartered Professional. And our conversation today is very much geared around the journeys towards achieving those. Some in progress, some already completed. So what is MCIPS? I said that our role is to set the standards for the profession, and the standard for MCIPS is absolutely based on attaining a certain level of competency and skills, so a certain level of proficiency. The level for MCIPS is honours degree level. It's not a degree, but that proficiency level is set at honours degree level. There is also an experiential requirement to achieving MCIPS, and also individuals are required to demonstrate their commitment to ethics by signing up to a code of conduct, where actually misdemeanours can be escalated up to an independent CIPS committee to pass judgment and indeed sanction individuals where that is found to be not in accordance with the code that they have signed up. So that very much speaks to that probity piece, a real hot topic across government and indeed private sector. And it's very much speaking to the role that we play as a professional body to ensure that there can be trust in procurement and supply professionals. I'm going to now come on to that enhanced status, which is around chartered professional. So to enhance your MCIPS status, once you've evidenced those three things through the different journeys that you undertake, you can also complete the ethical certificate, which is an ethical learning program, and also demonstrate your commitment to lifelong learning through continuing professional development. Unlike MCIPS, Chartered Professional expects individuals to renew their ethical commitment and commitment to lifelong learning annually. So once you've achieved Chartered Professional, you retain it through renewing those two commitments annually. I'm just going to move through to explain a bit of an overview about the different journeys towards MCIPS before I then discuss the experiences of our panel experts. So today for discussion, we're going to be focusing on three pathways through to achieving MCIPS Chartered Professional. The CIPS Professional Qualifications Pathway, which is a program of learning with modules in each qualification that build up towards helping individuals achieve their qualification, progress to the next qualification, and ultimately work their way towards MCIPS Chartered Professional. So it's very much an iterative program of learning which will help you develop the competencies, celebrate success partway through as you achieve those qualifications, and hopefully continue at your own pace based on your personal and professional circumstances. I should just highlight that there are three entry points: the certificate, the advanced certificate, and the diploma being the highest entry point. So the other CIPS programs that we'll discuss today are our Applied Learning Program, which is the CIPS Corporate Award Program. Again, that is another program of learning designed to help individuals develop competency, but it's very much positioned as a business improvement tool where the business will simultaneously derive benefits and improvements as individuals develop their capability through the applied learning program. The final program that we're going to discuss today is for experienced professionals operating in strategic level procurement and supply roles. And for that, we have an experiential pathway. At the bottom of the screen there, you can actually see how those different qualifications and pathways relate in academic terms to example qualifications, so that you get a sense for the different levels of those stepping stones towards professionalisation. And I've also included the relevant levels of competency as defined by the global standard for procurement and supply. Now, I always say there is no easy way to gaining MCIPS. However, as you can see, there are different pathways, and that's simply to reflect and ensure that there are relevant and accessible pathways depending on individuals' personal and professional circumstances. As you'll have seen, the standards that underpin each pathway are the same. What I just wanted to flag for those of you who already have Australian public sector certification through the Australian Qualifications framework, there are absolutely some ways in which you can leverage the achievements in that space to gain exemptions so that you do not have to repeat learning. So if you hold the Certificate 4 in procurement and contracting, you are eligible to start at the CIPS diploma, so that's the highest entry point. Equally, if you hold the Diploma of Procurement and Contracting or the Advanced Diploma of Procurement and Contracting and have achieved those in the past 5 years, you're able to gain exemptions from some of the modules, which hopefully helps you progress towards that MCIPS beacon more quickly. So without further ado, I'm going to move to our panel conversation, and I would like to introduce our first panel expert who has developed her proficiency and is partway through studying the CIPS professional qualifications on her journey towards achieving MCIPS. So Anita, welcome. Thank you for giving up your time today. Firstly, could I ask you to just share with our audience a little bit about your current role and background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I currently work for a consulting firm called Kalita Consulting. So amongst other specialist business areas, Kalita provides procurement and contract management consulting to government clients. So what that means for me is my role is very varied. Is varied. We have a lot of different engagements and a lot of different clients. So my role can involve everything from end-to-end procurement processes, giving different pieces of advice on procurement, as well as drafting documentation and providing approvals. Can also include contract management advice, as well as analysis of existing contracts to enable supply performance. So that's my role. A bit about my background. So I actually come from a sales background. So my previous experience is in account management. So I actually fell into procurement a little bit, and I think that's very similar for a lot of people in procurement. So I started off at Australian Maritime Safety Authority in an IT purchasing role for 3 months, coming from an IT account management background. So after that 3 months, I was offered a position within their procurement team. So that's how I fell into that. Really interesting position in terms of doing various procurement for business areas within AMSA, including emergency response, ship safety, corporate services. So really good opportunity to get my teeth into procurement through a role that offers sort of real life experiences in the work that you're actually doing affects people. So yeah.
Sure, and I think what's really interesting about your experience is you've seen the role of procurement and supply from both ends of the telescope, moving from that business to the procurement role. So you can, I guess, give as good as you got now.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it's interesting to see it from both sides of the field. So I actually, I know what people are looking for, and I know how people will respond as well.
Cool, thank you. So Anita, I know you've already achieved the CIPS Diploma in Procurement and Supply qualification, and you're now working your way towards the next stages. Would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit about your journey so far?
Yeah, absolutely. So at my role at AMSA, I actually completed the government Cert 4 in Procurement and Supply. So from there on, I wanted to do more study. So after AMSA, I actually started with Air Services Australia. And it was around that time that I did a bit of research on different study options. CIPS was one of the options that I looked into. The benefits to me of the CIPS study was I wanted a qualification that was well-rounded, flexible to working full-time, and that was internationally recognised. So for me, sort of taking that journey and taking that step into study, I had a chat with a few of my managers at Air Services who had completed MCIPS. And I guess one of the selling points for me around CIPS is that they told me that by doing that study, you would actually put into theory a lot of the work that I do, as in I wouldn't just be doing a role, I would understand why I did that role and what came behind it through doing the CIPS study. And I think that was a big selling point for me. So I started doing the diploma through self-study. I'm now working through the advanced diploma, and once that's finished, I'll be looking at doing the professional diploma to obtain MCIPS.
Thank you. A really good example there, how your background and previous qualification in terms of the Cert 4 kind of whetted your appetite almost to then progress towards the global recognition, which we would suggest kind of enhances that skill set and really complements and builds on that really strong foundation that you had already achieved. So well done there.
Thank you.
Now, I'm quite interested to understand from you where you're at now. What sorts of things do you feel that if only I'd known that when I first set out? What lessons have you learned that would be valuable to share with our audience? Yeah,
absolutely. So in terms of lessons learned, I think it's about really being, I guess, fair on yourself as well about setting study time. With the self-study, I try to set, a certain day and, certain afternoons a week to do that, to do my study. And I find that works well in that, I know it's coming up. I can prepare for it and work that into my schedule. I think I've sort of in the past also tried to book exams when I'm ready, when I'm confident with the material and not rushing into booking exams, and that's worked well for me. I mean, the other thing is it's if you're working full time and you're doing your self-study, is to work with your employer as well around assistance with study time off. That's really benefited me. And I've been lucky enough to have employers that have been flexible with that, as well as, helping with costs as well. The CIPS study is a very economical way to do it, but it's certainly engaging with your employer as much as possible. The other thing I'd say is also work with your managers and with your colleagues around the study that you're doing. The easiest way or the best way that I found to do well in my exams is being able to apply my learning to the work that I'm doing and asking questions and asking different people different questions and confirming my knowledge through those questions and also through the work that I'm doing. And then once you're in the exam situation, you're able to apply those experiences to the exam through the work that you've done and conversations that you've had with people. That's really helped me a lot.
I really love the way that you're able to not only use your learning and apply that in the workplace, but actually also reinforce it through consulting your colleagues, asking their questions, giving their views and so on, and translate that back into supporting you with your exams and your studies. So that feels like a really neat trick. Don't be afraid to have conversations with your colleagues about your study. Lean on them for advice, guidance, info. Great stuff. I know that, start embarking on a study journey can be pretty daunting, particularly by the time you then layer in work commitments, personal lives, etc., etc. And I kind of think there's very much the feeling that if you start studying, you're personal life's got to take the hit. And I guess really kind of a word from you really on why you feel that gaining the professional recognition, that MCIPS status, why do you feel that's important for you?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, doing the study in general and then working towards MCIPS, I've always wanted to challenge myself and become the best person that I can be, and you know, both increase my knowledge base in the procurement space, as well as formalise the knowledge that I have as well. In terms of the CIPS certification in particular, I was really drawn to a certification that was internationally recognised. That was really important for me. And at various stages over my career as well, in looking for different jobs, it's become more apparent that employers are looking for CIPS certification as well. It's really seemed predominant now with different roles. So I feel like by doing that certification, it would really give me an advantage. And by achieving, you know, any CIPS certification and then by achieving MCIPS, would help me stand out, but also give me more career options as well. I mean, it's such a varied job, and a lot of the CIPS study covers so many different aspects that are really, you know, it's a very exciting field to be in, and learning all those different aspects of procurement as well just opens up a whole new world.
Sure. Well, thank you, Nita. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences with our audience today. Don't go far because we will invite you back to participate in our panel Q&A. But thank you for sharing, and I'm going to move and start to discuss the applied learning or corporate award pathway. So for the corporate award pathway, I would like to welcome our panel expert, Paul Rushock. Welcome, Paul.
Good afternoon, Charlotte. Good afternoon, everyone.
So, Paul, I'd like to really start by exploring really your current role. If you could tell us a little bit about that and your background.
So I work for the South Australian Water Corporation in South Australia, and we deliver water and wastewater services across the whole of South Australia, across the state. And I work in our supply chain team, and we deal with all the construction goods and services contracts across the business. My particular role is the manager of supply chain excellence and change, and we're focused on driving change initiatives to deliver excellent procurement outcomes, is the way that I like to put it. And it's really improving our processes for both our procurement practitioners within our business, but also for people across our business as to how they source and manage the contracts for the goods and services and construction things that we need to do. So it's a lot of project work, and probably one of the key things that we're working on at the moment is, and I'm sure it's very topical across everywhere really globally, and that's on the sustainable procurement. So my role is helping drive the corporation to address that from a procurement perspective.
Thank you, Paul. And how did you get into procurement? Was it a bit like Anita? You kind of fell there? If you could just share your experience. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. My experience, I've been with SA Water now for 30 years, believe it or not. So, and my first probably 20 years was in frontline customer service, and worked my way through the ranks there. And I was actually managing some of our contracts in the billing and collection area. And then I moved into business process improvement as part of our shared services centre. And it was the business improvement stuff that our head of procurement at the time was looking to do in the procurement area. And he came to me and wanted someone to do the same thing in that space in procurement. So I got the opportunity, and I saw that as an opportunity not only to continue to do business process improvement stuff, which I really enjoyed, but also to learn some new skills in another part of the business, particularly the capital construction element, which I hadn't really dealt with in my other role. So moved into procurement, and then naturally started to build on learning all the different aspects of procurement and the contract management and all the things that come with that. So yeah, it was definitely falling into it, but something that I've really started to build on and grow and learn, and that led me into the MCIPS achievement now.
Sure, moved into procurement and never looked back, eh?
That's right.
What I love about that is it a bit like Anita's experience. It kind of shows that you can transfer into procurement from your previous kind of career space and actually take that learning and apply it fairly immediately in a procurement and supply role, while you then start to develop the technical procurement and supply management knowledge and skills. So thank you. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your journey towards gaining MCIPS with our audience, please?
Yes, so it was the corporate award program. So being in a management role, I had some other qualifications, but not in mainstream procurement. I certainly hadn't done any CIPS studies. One of my colleagues had, so he went through into the same corporate award program, but certainly my experience wasn't in that space. So I needed to first do a prerequisite assessment, which I did, but I was able to, just like you just said, build off of the other management skills and experience that I had to gain that prerequisite. And then the way that we tackled it here in South Australia, we had a syndicate. So it wasn't just SA Water, it was a range of other organisations, not all government, where we came together and got a number of participants. There's about 8 of us from different businesses, and we created that syndicate to go and work on the corporate award program. So it was a couple of day sessions for 5 different modules across around about 12 months. And after each of those sessions, then there's no exams in this program. It was a 3,000 word assignment on whatever the topic was for those modules. So things like supply chain analysis, category management, contract law, and those sorts of things. And then finally a 10,000 word major assignment, which you could choose the topic. Mine was modern slavery, linking back into that sustainable procurement space, and working through that. So pretty massive assignment. We had a 6-month period to work on that assignment and write that up and deliver that. So that was pretty much my experience to get to MCIPS.
Yeah, thank you. Any tips? Any lessons learned?
Yeah, absolutely. So with those they were work-based assignments. So they didn't have to be. So you could choose something that was somewhat academic or something that you might have been able to work on from the past. But the beauty of the corporate award program was you could get a work-based assignment and work through them at work. So whilst not all businesses had that opportunity, certainly in our space, we were able to work with our manager, work on a current business project and do that piece of work which added that value back to the business. So it was definitely making sure that we'd had those discussions with our manager to have work time available. So it wasn't all in our own time. And because it was work-based, we could do that in work hours as well. So that really helped. Yep, there was certainly outside of hours work as well. So it wasn't just that, but that certainly helped. So I encourage people to have that discussion, with their manager to see if they can get that same sort of arrangement. Definitely a bit like what Anita said with planning it out, absolutely key. The 3,000 word assignments are challenging enough. The 10,000 word is a big project. You've got to make sure you plan that out and give yourself time, whether it be, like I said, work time like I had, but outside of hours as well, and really plan that out. And also, like Anita said, leveraging on the network. It was really good for us because we had that corporate award, we had a syndicate, we had different people that were doing the same course at the same time that we could tap into, as well as other people that were doing mainstream CIPS training, as well as other people across the business that we could get support from, but also the CIPS network. When we're doing those assignments, we were making sure we get all the information you can get out of CIPS that's available on the website, and the modules that are provided and the books. Get your reference materials there was really a key to getting the right outcomes.
Excellent. So it sounds like planning played a significant role, which I guess is not too dissimilar to everyday business life anyway. and really getting that support from your employer, your colleagues, and so on, so you can actually get on and do some of that study simultaneously while delivering work outcomes, and of course tapping into your network. So great tips. Thank you, Paul. And I guess really finally, why was gaining MCIPS, or is MCIPS important for you in terms of professional recognition?
Yeah, I think that is it. I've thought about, it's really that qualification, having that qualification. It's to a global standard. It's recognised in the field. We had a recruitment drive in the UK a few years back. We had a number of people come over, and a few still working with SA Water that had MCIPS, and it was really just our understanding, and we see it everywhere. And it's just that recognition of that global standard, that you've achieved that, and that you're a practitioner at that level. But also, and similar to what Anita said, it's the job prospects that can also start to open up. It's a recognised qualification. It's good to have that after your name, and people understand, that what that means, and it's recognised in the industry.
Sure. Well, thank you, Paul. Really appreciate you sharing your experiences today. Don't go far, because we're going to come back to you as part of our audience Q&A session. So thank you. And I would like to now turn our attention to the Experiential Pathway, or the Management Entry Route, which is a pathway for our experienced professionals already operating in a strategic role in procurement and supply. So welcome, Carla Fisher. Thank you, Carla. Firstly, would you mind just explaining a little bit about you, Carla, your current role, a bit about your background, please?
Well, hi, Charlotte. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's enjoying the session so far. So my name is Carla Fisher. I am the Chief Procurement Officer for the Queensland Department of Communities, Disability Services and Seniors. It's a bit of a mouthful. My role is very much social services focused. The department that I work for looks after the social and economic support services for Queenslanders. So we, as I mentioned, we work in the social services space. I've been lucky enough to take on the role with the department. Queensland procurement, we have 6 mega categories. Social services is one of those categories. I have been lucky enough in previous roles to sit in the other categories, which are, for example, ICT, health, building, construction, maintenance, but social services and the Department of Communities, as I said, we focus very much on social, economic, vulnerable Queenslanders. So delivering those really key frontline services, which is obviously really topical at the moment, whether it's PPE, personal protective equipment, whether it's community support services, whether it's just having someone to talk to, whether it's a neighbourhood watch centre where members of the community can come to for support, equipment, requirements, etc. So it's really that helping people, which is something that I'm really, really passionate about. My current role is quite a busy role. I look after a procurement team. I also have input into the funding services team. I look after a governance function, so policies, procedures, templates, and the like. We're also going through a transformation at the moment in the department. So I'm rolling out a new procurement framework model across the department, hopefully to ensure a little bit better streamlining, more efficiencies, which is a lot of procurement change for our department. Some really good activities going on, which I'm really excited about. It's a good opportunity for me, so I take it as an opportunity, and I'm probably a pretty positive, optimistic person at the best of times, but you can certainly imagine for those procurement practitioners on the line, there's certainly some changes, and there certainly will be some bumps and some glitches as we progress through our transition. My past roles, sorry, Charlotte, you please go.
Sure. And I think most people working in procurement would certainly attest to bumps and glitches is kind of pretty much a fact of life for procurement professionals.
That is very true.
So how did you get into procurement? How did you get to where you are?
Sure. I was lucky enough, I used to run a business in private industry, and one of my key roles was purchasing, as I would call it back then. So I started when purchasing was purchasing. Procurement didn't really exist. It wasn't really a thing back then. I was lucky enough to look after the purchasing, the supply chains, the relationships, so all those good things that I call foundation skills. I then moved across to Queensland Public Service, not into a procurement role directly, but then I came back into what became a purchasing role. A couple of my interesting roles along the way, I worked for Queensland Police Service. And I used to buy, I can tell people now, I used to buy speed camera and red light camera equipment. So I never told anybody at the time, because people who did know me used to ask questions like, how do I get out of red light camera tickets? How do I get out of speed camera tickets? What do you buy? Why do you buy that? So that was a really interesting role. Also, I used to work federal or Commonwealth government for the taxation office, where one of my biggest projects was an outsourcing project for telecommunications. So that was a multi-billion-dollar project. So I guess I've transitioned from private purchasing, if you like, into public sector, state government, Commonwealth government, certainly some really interesting projects along the way. And then I've added the formal training accreditation along the way to bolster my on-the-job expertise.
Sure. Thank you. Sounds like you've had a really interesting and varied career, and I'm sure more recently with the interesting business environment that we all find ourselves in thanks to the COVID-19 situation, that's only set to continue. So thank you, Carla. I'm going to really switch now towards your journey towards MCIPS. If you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit with our audience about your journey towards gaining MCIPS Chartered Professional.
Sure. So as I touched on, I was lucky enough to have undertaken Queensland Government accreditation training, so the level 1, 2, 3, 4, which equates to a diploma and then an advanced diploma. When I switched to federal government or Commonwealth government, it was actually really interesting. I had to go through the re-accreditation, if you like, or the RPL process to gain the Commonwealth side of procurement accreditation training, albeit the same thing. I then came back to Queensland state government. Luckily, I didn't have to go through it again, because I thought I'll have to do it again. I'll have three lots of accreditation. But along that journey, I've kept adding to my procurement accreditation. And back in the day, which makes me sound like I'm a little bit older, a lot of the procurement jobs that I saw, you used to have, it was a mandatory requirement that you had a procurement accreditation. And I noticed that along, I guess, years have passed, and that's probably dropped off a little bit, that procurement professionals maybe don't necessarily have to have that government accreditation or the certification or the professionalism, which is not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of the time we ask people to have the ability to demonstrate that they can get it. Obviously there's budgets involved, or people have to pay for it themselves. What I'm seeing now is that big organisations, private entity, government departments are now starting to bring that back around, where they are asking for their employees or potential employees to have that procurement professionalism, that accreditation. So I felt with my already back pocket accreditation, I also undertook postgraduate business studies at the same time. So I thought I'd throw the MCIPS in there at the same time, which may or may not have been a smart decision, but it was the one that I made. So my journey was the management entry route path, the MER path, as Charlotte's got up on the screen. And I went through the process, which just for those that aren't familiar, it's actually quite an easy process. The first step is really just popping through your details, so your CV, resume, etc. And you go through an assessment process. One of the CIPS team looks at what you've got as compared to the curriculum or the criteria, and then they keep continuously communicating with you as to what's next. So it's actually, apart from the information online available and the support from the team, they step you through the what's next process. Once I did that, I was advised that I was able to progress to the next step. So I then had to get some, I call them referee, but line manager reports as to I'm actually who I say that I am, and I'm in the job and have had the career history that I've said that my CV says that I have. So that again was quite simple. Got some people to fill in some forms, my current line manager, some previous referees, etc. Sent that off, and again the CIPS team assessed that for me, and then they came back to me and advised that yes, that's great, go on to the next path. Then the next step was where my time and planning became really important. So going through the learning material, making sure, and I guess not dissimilar to Anita and Paul, making sure that I'd allowed myself time. The one thing I probably noticed was some terminology. So just allowing anyone that's considering the management entry route, and probably for all study that matter, just making sure you allow yourself some time and really committing to that time. Giving yourself some away time, try and lock yourself in a room if that's humanly possible with, jobs, family, kids, etc. Just giving yourself time to go through, understand the terminology, read through the learning material, not pressure yourself given that we've all got lots of other things on board at the moment. Mine was a 2-step process. So I did an online examination, which was, Charlotte, correct me if I'm wrong, an hour and a half. I think I had something like that. And it was one sitting, do it at once, at your own pace, but get it done in that time. And then I had an interview with a CIPS assessor or an RTO authority, etc., representing CIPS, which was a couple of hours to talk through, I guess not dissimilar to the online exam, but talking through my experiences, how they related to the learning material, how my career demonstrated some particular procurement projects, some particular mentoring experience, some particular management experience. Again, they stepped me through the process, but I certainly have some learnings for myself along the way. But as I said, I guess that's probably from my practical, my management experience. The studies that I'd already done took me on a journey to why this path was the right path for me.
Sure. Thank you, Carla. And I can see how, that depth and also breadth of experience that you've built up throughout your career really kind of led you to a pathway where you were then able to start on that experiential pathway. And I can see really from what you've said how if you kind of fresh out the starting gates, it certainly wouldn't be an appropriate pathway towards MCIPS. So thank you. You shared kindly some tips during that around familiarization with terminology, creating that quiet space and so on. Any key parting tip that you'd care to share with our audience if they're considering pursuing that route?
And I think probably just a couple of things. So in my experience, procurement professionals are very organised, very time management focused, and I think that plays well to people that are going to consider the study path in whichever pathway they do choose. The terminology, as I said, was one thing. I read words that I thought, gosh, I don't even understand what this word is. And I questioned myself a few times thinking, gee, I have to have a second guess on this one. But it's not that second guessing, it's actually a really good learning opportunity as well. So that to me, I took a step back and thought, this is a really great opportunity. Even though I'm going down the management entry route path, I'm still learning so much at the same time. I've talked about the time and preparation, etc. The one bit of feedback I gave, which Charlotte, as you know, was I found it helpful that when I had my interview, so I'd gone through the online exam, the interview questions, I would have preferred to have them in front of me, whereas it was just a lot of talking. But I've given that feedback through to CIPS, and that's been considered further. Make notes, be really well prepared, have your information. Like I set myself out, put my hands up at the camera. I had myself set out. I had lots of information, lots of notes, be really well prepared, and just talk about your experiences. That's the way that I did it, and it seemed to work well for me.
Cool. So it sounds like having those notes and that preparation, even if you didn't necessarily need it at the time, that preparation was there as kind of a safety net.
Gives you that confidence.
Thank you. Cool. And then I guess finally, why is that MCIPS Charter professional recognition important for you?
Sure. I guess 2 parts, and I've been lucky, as I said, in my career. I'm working with a department now that we are going on quite a transitional journey at the moment. and any procurement advice that's given hopefully is well respected procurement advice, but our Director General, for example, often says, what does procurement think about this? And I guess I take a step back often and think, wow, well, if the Director General wants to know what procurement's opinion is, then that makes me think, well, that's really important. So it's emphasising not just the importance of myself, my job, etc., but procurement as a profession. And I think Paul eloquently described that having those MCIPS letters after your name is not going to hurt anybody. I've actually gone one step further and been lucky enough to be part of the CIPS Profession Steering Committee. So I'm actually really wanting to add one step further to that and help contribute to the profession as we move forward as well. So as I said, I've taken it as two parts, one that I'm doing it myself, but I'm also really wanting to help others in their own professional journeys as we move forward as well. But I think it's being more and more, as I said, looked for, and what was maybe 20 years ago, the mandatory accreditations, etc., I think that's starting to come back around again in the profession.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Carla. Really appreciate you sharing your experience. And I'm actually going to now invite back all of our panel members to sit alongside Carla and myself, and really invite any questions please, from the audience. I think the three of you sharing your journeys, certainly for me, has really highlighted that it's not just about the learning, you know, there's a significant investment required from anyone really seeking to gain that professional recognition. That investment is time. Let's face it, it's also money, because these things do also cost, but it's also emotion. You know, there's an awful lot of pressure on you anyway in your business lives. So actually rising to the challenge and accepting that additional layer of pressure to be independently assessed and have your credentials independently validated is also something that you don't take lightly. So seriously, kudos to each and every one of you for not only going for it and working your way towards that MCIPS and professional recognition, but also thank you for sharing your experiences with us. So yeah, I'm just going to move through and see how we're at with our questions. So hopefully. Okay, so just going through, forgive me as I just go through these, some questions that we have. So a really good question come in, thank you, from someone in New Zealand. I have an MBA from Victoria University in Wellington, and I also have the CIPS Diploma in Procurement and Supply qualification. Can I use my MBA qualification from exempting me from repeating some of the CIPS qualification modules? Okay, great question. So yes, as a professional body, we do have an exemptions policy for the professional qualifications pathway. And if you've achieved any relevant qualifications in the past 5 years, we are able to exempt you from modules and you can apply for exemptions. So there is more information on our website, so I'll perhaps direct you there so we can get through, but absolutely, provided a qualification is achieved in the past 5 years, it then is potentially relevant and eligible for exemptions. So great question, thank you. So had another question come through. Anita, this is a question specifically for you, and it's asking how many units did you have to take for the diploma in procurement and supply qualification?
Okay, so the diploma has 6 units and they're all core units, and that gives you a total of 60 credits on the diploma. Okay,
sure. And then also the second part to that question is how many units coming up for the advanced diploma and then I guess the professional diploma?
Yeah, so the advanced diploma, there's 5 core units, 3 electives, and that makes up a total of 60 credits. So for me, doing the advanced diploma at the moment, it's really focusing about, in terms of choosing your electives, it's really focusing about where you see your career path as well. For example, I chose to do electives that I was interested in, both in terms of learning as well as in terms of a career path. The professional diploma, obviously I haven't done yet, but I assume would be the same, in that you have 4 core units and 3 electives to make up the total 60 units. So it's just about having a review of those electives and figuring out what's of most interest to you both now and in the future to make those choices.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate that. So Paul, you're in the hot seat next. Question for you around your journey through the Applied Learning or Corporate Award Programme. Firstly, how long did it take you to complete the Corporate Award and achieve MCIPS?
So the award itself was 18 months. And so a little bit longer to then finalise the MCIPS component, which was really just getting a reference letter from my manager and coupling that with my CV and with the outcome from the course and sending that off to the UK, which is a really quick turnaround actually. So 18 months really for the course. Yep. Okay,
thank you. And then another question actually about your 10,000 word assignment, the monster. Is that close to like a thesis?
Well, not having had experience with a thesis, I don't know if you could call it that, but it's, I mean, the way that works, if I just explain it to some extent, you had to come up with a question, so it was your own question. So my question was, what's the extent of modern slavery in SA water, which is pretty broad, so I had to start to refine that and take a risk-based approach to looking at that. And then really my assignment was then built as to how I used the different things that we learned through the modules throughout the course to investigate that, explain what modern slavery was, do a risk assessment, investigate some of the supply chain, and then put a project plan about how SA Water would then start to tackle that going forward. So yes, you had to reference it. Yes, you had to go and do a lot of interviews and incorporate all that sort of information back into your assignment. So like I said, not sure whether that's a thesis, but an extensive piece of work nonetheless.
Yeah, and it sounds like it helped you with obviously develop the learning and it ultimately achieve that MCIPS credential, but also would have applied directly to your business and helped your business from an improvement perspective.
Yeah, no question.
Thank you. Carla, one for you. Did you have to do further studies after the online exam competency assessment for the interview assessment?
Sure. So after I did the interview, there was a couple of weeks and I got a report back. I didn't have to do any further study and there were no gaps identified. So the report that came back basically mapped my responses with the online exam, the interview assessments and what I'd provided to what was required for the management entry route. As I said, I didn't have to do any further touch-ups, additions, etc. But I have continued to do some reading just for my own personal knowledge and just to build up my capability as well. But yes, nothing further from me as a gap filler.
Oh, thank you. Got a question now, probably for all of you, if I may take that quickly. And we've probably got then time for maybe another couple of questions after this one. So really, what do you feel that you achieving MCIPS, or what do you hope that achieving MCIPS will give you in terms of an edge, competitive edge, a differentiator?
I'll jump in with the hoping. I think for me as well, I mean, coming from, I live in Canberra, so Canberra's a little bit less private sector orientated. So there's certainly, I feel, less people studying towards CIPS in Canberra, and obviously we hope that grows over time. But you know, in I guess what you might deem as a small community, then having MCIPS will certainly help me stand out from that perspective.
Okay, thank you. Paul, I don't know if you care to add.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's no doubt that yeah, it's that uplift in recognition and the expertise as well. So I see it. Yeah, once we see people across government and in other agencies, and even if they apply for roles, if they've got that MCIPS, you know that they've got some good qualification behind it and some good expertise and some good knowledge of a whole range of different aspects of things across, you know, the whole of that process end to end. So and other parts of expertise, be it contract law, the sustainable procurement stuff that I've looked in. There's a whole range of different things that just bring that uplift of capability in the procurement space. So really worthwhile.
Great, thank you. Carla.
And I'll probably just add exactly to what Paul and Anita have said. It's that recognition of accreditation. So whilst there's some amazing procurement professionals out there who have got the on-the-job experience, and that I always base things on I call it the 70-20-10 rule, that on-the-job experience is invaluable. Having that formal professional recognition is also still really invaluable as well. Even though I've got the MCIPS accreditation, it's not going to stop me, as I said, continually building my capability and expertise. So there's a lot of people with MCIPS accreditation, and there is a step further than that still to go. But I think it does set you apart from others. And if you are competing for that, that amazing job that you want, or that career development, etc., it is going to set you apart. So I would highly recommend it.
Great, thank you. We've had a few questions really asking about eligibility for the experiential or MER pathway. So one individual's commenting on they've already achieved a qualification, the CIPS level 4 diploma, and another one saying they have experience from overseas in another country, in India. So what I would just summarize is that experiential pathway is open to anyone who is experienced in procurement and supply, and we would typically say your benchmark's about 10 years procurement and supply experience. And most importantly, having that senior level strategic / leadership role in procurement and supply, and having experience at that level for the past 5 years. So if you work on that as a rule of thumb, you're potentially eligible if you tick those boxes. Certainly find out more on our website. Alternatively, we are actually hosting another live webinar next week, which will unpack that experiential pathway in more detail. So look out for details of that towards the end of this session. And I think probably final question around the module numbers. Is the level 4 diploma made up of 2 12-credit modules and 6 6-credit modules? So the diploma qualification has 8 modules, 2 large modules and 6 small modules, which basically equals 60 credits, as Anita said. So hopefully that just clarifies there. And then there's a final question. And that's around, is MCIPS recognised in relation to other degree courses? And that's very much one for the universities, because each have their own recognition arrangements. So thank you to our panel. I'm going to switch back to Jane, who will just conclude us. So thank you ever so much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Charlotte. Thank you, Charlotte. And thanks to the entire CIPS team, particularly General Manager Sharon Morris, for embracing the idea that we've been trying to promote around leveraging Australian qualifications and the pathways to professionalisation and MCIPS. Charlotte, you've done a great job hosting today, so thanks very much. And thanks also to Anita, Carla and Paul for sharing your really valued insights on your journey to MCIPS. It's really been a terrific session, and I've certainly got a lot out of it, and I hope everybody else has done. Many thanks for everybody joining the webinar. These webinars are only as good as the people who join us and ask questions and keep it quite interactive. So thanks very much for that. I just want to remind you all of a couple of events next week, webinars on the 2nd of June at 12 noon on the topic of CIPS ANZ webinar, how procurement can use data and technology to drive economic recovery. That starts at 12 noon. And then on the 4th of June, a session that builds on I guess what we've been talking about today at 12:15 Australian Eastern Standard Time, 2:15 New Zealand time, on the topic of learn how achieving MCIPS will transform your career. And that's one certainly that I intend to participate in as well. Please reach out to the ACT committee members. We'd love to invite you into our ACT LinkedIn group. We have a focus on public sector articles and things like that and sharing knowledge. Of course, we'd like you to continue to practicing all the social distancing and play safe during this, this period. But thank you very much for joining and good afternoon.